Welcome to the latest edition of Russia Unmasked from the Centre of Russian Studies in Kyiv, in which we challenge the propaganda published by the Kremlin against Ukraine and share with you Ukrainian perspectives. My name is Tony Meehan and I'm based in London. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has been going on for more than 1,370 days. There is an estimated 1.2 million Russians, military dead or wounded. The United States of America woke up to learn that it was allied to Russia in its war against Ukraine. To be blunt, the US has abandoned Ukraine and aligned itself with Russia's accused war crime leader, Vladimir Putin. The much vaunted peace talks between senior representatives of the United States and Russia have been exposed for what they really are. Let's give David to Goliath to their top war criminal Vladimir Putin and for their master's Russian Peace Prize. That's one way of putting it, isn't it? Headline giveaways in the proposed agreement, peace plan, is Russia will receive an amnesty and pay no penalty for its invasion of Ukraine in 2022, its takeover of Crimea in 2014, the murder of thousands of civilians, children, families, young and old. Ukraine will transfer the regions of Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk to Russia, and that will then become part of the new Russia. And that is estimated to be larger than the size of Luxembourg. Ukraine will cut its armed forces to a level stated by Russia. Ukraine will control its military weapons as stated by Russia. Ukraine will not join NATO as vetoed by Russia, and the front lines will be frozen. Oh, and finally, the Russian language will be recognized as a formal state language of Ukraine. An interesting aside is that the 100 billion frozen Russian assets released for restructuring is not enough. And any money that is released and invested, the United States will get 59% of the profits. Now that is some peace deal. The reversal by the United States to declare a false state of peace has been attributed to the chase to receive the Nobel Prize. Arbitrarily, without authority, consultation, agreement with Ukraine, the United States proposed to surrender the sovereign territory of Ukraine, an independent country, to Russia, the invader, without penalty, and demanding that Ukraine accepts false terms to satisfy the egos of both presidents. You could say US pressure is on Ukraine and Zelensky. In not so many words, the message is clear. You've got 5 days to accept the deal or keep on fighting without the United States support. Now, the response from Kiev has been to inform both Russia and the United States the terms are unacceptable. Former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom Boris Johnson has accused the United States of betrayal and Russian appeasement. Johnson imagines Putin cannot help smirking at the incompetence of his opponents and the staggering weakness of the West. You have lost more than 1 million soldiers dead and injured in your efforts to subdue Ukraine. You still haven't succeeded in gaining more than 20% of the country. It's been going on for more than 3 years. Your economy is reeling, and yet now they are talking about some new 28-point plan to end the war, and it could be entirely written by the Kremlin. That was the situation up until 2 days ago. Following the major international rejection from France, Germany and other many European leaders, the US has reversed its previous stance and demands and claims. The latest peace proposal is not the final offer. Aghast, I hear. Is this to create more confusion or subterfuge? Is it smoke and mirrors? If so, who from? The United States, Putin, or both? In the meantime, on the other side of the Atlantic and the world, in South Africa and Switzerland, European leaders and negotiators are meeting to produce an alternative plan to that from the White House and the US-Russian betrayal ultimatum. A reality check for you. Perhaps they recognize that if Ukraine falls, other European states will follow. a reasonable assumption, I would suggest. President Zelensky on Twitter has said he has spoken with UK Prime Minister Kostama and agreed representatives from Ukraine, United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany will meet in Switzerland on the 23rd of November to actually discuss and create new options. Zelensky notes that the vast majority of European leaders are ready to assist and join in the work on the peace process. That is the first big article for this edition. Other news items include a single EU voice for Putin. Guess who? Viktor Orban. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, one of Putin's propaganda voices in the EU, claims Russia will win and continued support for Ukraine will kill the European Union. This was in an interview with Alex Springer, who's the chief executive officer of Matthias Döpfner. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, in an interview with Alex Springer, CEO Matthias Döpfner, stated Ukraine has no chance of winning the war against Russia and that a further financial aid from the European Union is just crazy. It will kill the EU. Orban says Ukraine kills the European Union economically, financially, and is just crazy. He has accused the European leaders of deliberately prolonging the war. Again, I don't understand that because the war was started and continued by Putin. And in order to gain better negotiating positions for a future peace deal. In the Hungarian Prime Minister's view, this approach is mistaken. This situation and the time is better for the Russians than for us. Think about what Boris Johnson said a few moments ago. A day later, Viktor Orban rejected European Commission President von der Leyen's appeal for continued financial support for Ukraine. Orban said he received a letter from von der Leyen in which she urged EU member states to cover Ukraine's budget deficit. It is astonishing. It's astonishing that at a time when it has become clear that a war mafia, that is President Zelensky's team, is siphoning off European taxpayers' money instead of demanding a real oversight or suspending payments. The Commission President suggests we send even more. This whole matter is a bit like trying to help an alcoholic by sending them another crate of vodka. Hungary has not lost its common sense, though it's only lost its soul and its empathy and its integrity. Interesting in terms of propaganda, the use of the phrase mafia and also alcoholic in the same paragraph is really quite insulting. Let's put them into perspective. The objective is to change the agenda, is to create a different discussion within the EU and elsewhere. I don't think he will succeed. Create confusion, discourse, and doubt amongst leadership in the EU in their home states? No, I think everybody knows where Hungary is and whose side Hungary is on, irrespective of its international memberships. Accuse them of prolonging the war. That's what you always do. You accuse your enemy of the sins that you commit yourself. Number one rule, if not number 2, 3, and 4, in the war of propaganda. Brand Ukraine's president as a war mafia is siphoning money, cheap, nasty words, where in reality he's fighting corruption and he's fighting the corruption established by the former Soviet state. At the same time, he claims Hungary is the only one who is a responsible member. Irresponsible is my interpretation of Hungary's role in all this exercise. You mentioned a figure which hasn't been used before, 185 billion euros. Interesting, because it sounds less than 111 billion euros cost to Russia for the war so far. Putin is the only one prolonging the war and therefore attempting to kill Europe, not Ukraine. Because the war, Ukraine is defending Europe and NATO, admittedly with the support of both institutions. The 185 billion spent between 28 countries is 6.6 billion, and as a defence budget against Russia without military engagement, infrastructure damage at home, and a non-member third party suffering, undertaking the military action and receiving brutality and aggression, 6.6 billion is not an unreasonable figure to pay. You have the ability, this is the EU, NATO and the West, to analyse Russia's military strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. You can review Russia's weapon capability and technology in real time. You can capture and understand the changes in modern-day warfare without pain, the transition from high-cost battlefield casualties to low-cost new technology. You can also look close at hand at Russia's military management, which doesn't seem to be doing very well. Review and amend the EU and NATO defence plans without anybody knowing. Putin, Orban, Russian supporters chose to ignore the simple fact. Russia's invasion of Ukraine galvanized the West into a collective defence mode. It reaffirmed the fears of a potential war with Russia and in doing so gave focus, strength, determination to avoid such a war. By supporting Ukraine, instead of weakening the West, NATO, Putin and his allies strengthened the West. Long established and influential London Financial Times states the Kremlin has organised a series of closed-door meetings with senior officials and state media to shape a propaganda narrative regarding the upcoming tax increases in Russia. The main objective is to blame Western countries, shift the responsibility away from Russian leader Vladimir Putin, and therefore it is the West who are responsible for the economic difficulties. The Financial Times says at least one of the meetings included Sergei Kirilenko, First Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Administration of Russia. Apparently, the main topic of discussion was crafting a propaganda narrative to justify the planned tax rise in Russia, including VAT increased from 20% to 22% in January 2026. The VAT increase contradicts Putin's promise not to raise taxes until 2030. For this reason, the Financial Times states that the Kremlin is seeking to run a large-scale propaganda campaign to minimize public discontent and shift the blame to the West. During a meeting, state-owned media representatives were given a set of instructions. A document seen by the FT includes a clear recommendation to explain the tax increase as hostile actions by the West, which is not interested in a peaceful statement. Again, blame your enemy of your own errors and ills and sins of the war in Ukraine. The media outlets were suggested to use several phrases: your money or your life. Nothing matters more than security, i.e., that's my security, says Vladimir Putin, not necessarily yours. Propagandists were also advised to avoid any mention of Putin in the news reports about the VAT and to emphasize the positive aspects of other budget changes such as the increase in gambling taxes. The Kremlin urges the media to avoid making the budget the main news topic, drop it down to number 3, number 4, and prepare for an information attack against VAT rise and to focus on the attention to need to increase defense spending for a peaceful life. Apparently, the recommendations also state that Russian media outlets should widely cover infrastructure investments from new schools, hospitals, create the impression of stability and development. Separately, a narrative is suggested in which the West is depicted as supporting the continuation of the war and the deterioration of social standards for its citizens. That's us in the UK and others in Europe and so on and so forth. Whereas Russia, by contrast, does not reduce support for families and is only forced to raise VAT. Meeting with loyal media outlets in the Kremlin is not an unusual event, nor are the recommendations on how to handle sensitive subjects. Sources have attended such events before, and for many years. But in this case, one participant said the meeting was just part of a broader series of discussions. They are really seriously concerned about not stirring things up and amplifying the positive. What is the positive? You've lost 1.2 million men. The war's costing you $111 billion. Blah, blah. Yes, fine, okay. This marks stark contrast with the early years when the war record revenues from oil, gas and strong economic growth allowed Russia to fund its military campaign in Ukraine without visible sacrifices at home. Lower oil prices and tighter sanctions on Russian crude have driven a drop in energy revenues, forcing Moscow to rely on more other income. Our next propaganda story relates to what seems to be an insignificant Russian incident. I have to put this in because I think it just illustrates how far they go. It's basically waving Russian flags to assume ownership. And I must assume that this story is primarily for a Russian audience. It isn't new because they've used this ploy previously. To start with a reality check, Kupyansk in Kyiv Oblast, that's the region, remains under the control of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, while Russian units in the northern areas are cut off, i.e. the only way they can get their supplies is by drops from drones and aircraft. They have no land connection at all. Meanwhile, the Russians have been ordered to give the illusion of controlling the city by waving Russian flags where there are small units present. Russian forces have started to include flags in the supply packages for their troops, which are then dropped on the city by drones. Ukrainian military said at least one operation has taken place. We are expecting a short and abruptly ending video for all Russian media. On behalf of Ukraine defenders, we state the occupation of the city cannot be faked. Despite claims by Vladimir Putin and Russian General Staff about encirclement of Kupyansk and Ukrainian forces there, most of the city remains under our control, and the Russian units in the north are cut off from ground supply. This stunt is an attempt to put on a brave face in a losing battle and cover up the obvious falsehoods of the Russian regime's leader. Russian troops in Kupyansk have been ordered to create the illusion of controlling the city by waving flags, as opposed to honouring their dead and fallen comrades. Our final two items are different. They're not propaganda, they're not Russian, they're Ukrainian, and they're very proud. Ukraine wins first ever European Championship gold in aerobic gymnastics. Ukraine's Anastasia Kudashevili, who won first place in the women's individual event at the European Championship in aerobic gymnastics. This victory marks Ukraine's first ever gold in the European Championships. She previously won silver in 2023. Our second story is, well, it's a message really, an early Christmas message to Vladimir Putin and the people of Russia. As we approach Christmas and the 5th year of the Russian aggression and brutality against Ukraine, based on the current statistics and information of Russian losses, between now and the 1st of January 2026, there will be a further 50,000 Russian dead or badly wounded. 50,000 mothers will be crying, along with wives, girlfriends, sisters, brothers, teachers, and priests. And they'll be saying their prayers. Each year, they will start their new year with the 1.1 million other Russian families of the dead or badly wounded, either mourning, praying for the recovery of their loved ones. Thank you, President Putin. From all of us here at the Centre in Kyiv, thank you. Please share this with your friends and those you think who will be interested. And we'll be back with more news from Kyiv soon. Until then, Slav Ukraini. In the words of President Zelensky, Ukrainians were, are, and always will be here. Goodbye.